So I do want to honor my offer to answer them. So somebody asked me what my inspiration to become an author was. And that's a complex question because there's not any one single thing. I always did creative writing when I was younger. I read books. I was into comic books really big, like getting into a teenager, and I just wanted to be a part of that, wanted to do something like that. So in school, whenever we had opportunities to do creative writing, a lot of my peers would do the minimum, and I would do these big, long, blown up things that were well outside the boundaries of the assignment. But as an adult, when I began to take my writing more seriously and thinking about publishing and whatnot, I had a lot of big ideas. I have a philosophy background, and I found a lot of connection to ancient people, ancient thinkers, and I found sometimes they were more relatable than the people around me. So what I wanted to do was capture not just their ideas, but some of my own ideas, and find a way to express them without just writing a philosophy textbook, because who's going to read that, right? So I started writing fiction as vehicles for bigger ideas. So, sometimes parts of ideas can't be expressed, or they get lost for the sake of the narrative, because at the end of the day, you want to write an entertaining narrative or people aren't going to read it. But within the narratives that I write, there are characters that are expressing ideas or operating from perspectives that aren't sort of typical. So I try to tell a story that allows people to step outside their typical way of thinking. It encourages them to, without being too confrontational, because they're getting the entertainment value of the story. I don't think that's unique in people who write, books, scripts, comic books, but I do think I bring a unique perspective to that. That sort of starts delving into a different question. But yeah, my inspiration was I had ideas that I thought other people could benefit from, but maybe not avail themselves to if they were just expressed like raw, point blank, like I said, textbook style. So I've incorporated them into the stories that I tell. Another question that I was asked was about business side advice on writing. Honestly, I'm in no position to give business advice, although I think it's interesting to say more about that, so I will. I'm not a commercially successful author. So, and I don't think anybody that goes into writing books should expect themselves to become one immediately. I mean, maybe you will, and that's great. So from a business perspective, I just encourage people to have additional revenue streams. Those of you that know me know that I have a doctoral degree in counseling. Before I was writing, but before I started dedicating writing as a full-time job, that's maybe not accurate, but writing became the equivalent of my full-time job. I had all my debts paid. I have zero debt. I have a doctoral degree. I have no student loans. I have a cabin that's paid for. I have a car that I'm sitting in right now that's paid for and should operate for years and years to come without too much maintenance cost. So yeah, I just had everything that I could put in order before I left my previous career in order to pursue writing more dedicatedly. However, even with writing being my primary occupation, I do other things. So I still do some pro bono counseling. I don't make any money from that. I do accept donations. Very few people do, and that's fine. I don't expect them to. So that's not lucrative by any stretch of the imagination. I do actually make more off selling books than that. But I do that as a way of giving back. That's my way of staying connected to people, even though not necessarily in my community, because I do counseling online, so I have people from all over the place. But it's my way of I'm in a financial place where I don't have to pursue that for money, so it allows me to stay connected and give back from my current position. So, I don't just write. I do other things. Particularly, my primary source of income is through stock market. So several years ago, I taught myself how to day trade, how to analyze stocks. And then in the years since, I've invested more money, particularly when I got out of my previous career, and I've been able to, turn that into something that can pay the bills. And again, before I did that, I minimized my bills. So I also don't want to portray myself as some like genius stockbroker. I make enough off stocks to pay the bills, and I won't claim any more success than that. But from a business side advice, my biggest piece of business advice is don't expect to go into writing and pay the bills with that immediately. I mean, maybe you will, and that's great, but maybe you won't, and you need to be prepared for that. Pitfalls to publishing, marketing, and distribution. I'll kind of maybe do these backwards. So distribution, if you write more than one book and you do an initial print run of hundreds and you don't sell all of them, each book starts adding boxes and boxes and boxes of inventory. And if you don't have a dedicated space, which a dedicated space will cost more money, if you don't have a dedicated space, all those boxes will start to pile up in your home and it will get a little out of control. So I highly recommend a print-on-demand service. It's no secret that I use Amazon. I know a lot of people don't necessarily like Amazon. That's fine. That's your business. But having some kind of print-on-demand model, especially initially, yes, you'll make less money, but unless you know for a fact you're going to sell, the majority of an initial print run, having hundreds of books, 3 books, 4 books. I'm up to 10 books now. It would be ridiculous to have hundreds of boxes of 10 different books piled around my home. It would also be ridiculous to pay for some kind of warehouse or storage space. So when it comes to distribution, I highly recommend some kind of print on demand model where you aren't personally shipping books all the time, because every time you spend packing up books and mailing them, you should be spending writing. So, and then also the whole idea of having all these boxes everywhere, you don't want to do that. Just trust me, you don't want to do that. As far as marketing, I'm struggling with this one. I thought I had a bit of an audience that would respond to more frequent publishing, and it turns out that I don't. Some of you are great. I'm not knocking anyone in particular. Some of you have bought everything I've written, and that's amazing. Some of you have bought nothing. Some of you have bought 1 or 2, and that's fine. I appreciate every single person who has participated and supported my writing. But I did overestimate that when I began publishing more frequently, that everybody would jump in and just buy, not everybody buy every book, but toward that end of the spectrum is not the reality. And I was expecting it to be more toward that end of the spectrum. So I need to reevaluate how I market the books and who I market the books to. And at some point I'm going to have to spend more money on marketing, which is not something in the past that I've done. So I just have to look at the marketing. I don't have an answer to that question, but I think admitting I don't have an answer to that question and where I made my mistake, I'm not really comfortable with that word, but it is what it is. That is something that other people, if you're interested in doing something like this, could learn from. So marketing, I have not figured out yet, and I'll just be completely honest about that. When it comes to publishing, which is pitfalls of publishing, which is the last question I was asked, I'm not sure pitfalls maybe is the right word. That's the way the question was asked. But with publishing, if you're not a great editor, you're going to want to pay an editor. I am not a great editor, and I had somebody edit some stuff for free. He did a pretty good job. Again, not trying to knock anybody, but there was just a different level of commitment I needed. Not with like content editing, which the person that did edit my first book was very helpful with, like organizing the thoughts and maybe moving some scenes around and expressing things in a different way. He was really great about advising that stuff. He definitely helped me make a better book. But I really needed somebody to go in line by line, look for typos and that sort of thing. And that's the kind of job that honestly you just need to pay somebody to do. It's tedious work. There are people who specialize in it. They're obviously going to do better than, any of your friends, no matter what their skill sets are. An avid reader will catch a typo, sure, but somebody to go in meticulously line by line and not really read your book, but specifically just look for typos, that's a labor intensive job. And so I highly recommend anybody publishing, especially their first or second book, to hire someone to do that, because my first book went out with lots of typos, and I won't say it was embarrassing, but I recognized that it was avoidable, and I wish in hindsight I would have done more of that. Now that I'm writing full time and I have more experience, I've been doing some more of my own editing and doing line by line proofreading. I've kind of developed those skills now, but I'm still not perfect at it, and I still really need somebody else to comb through that for me. Having done a pass myself first, that definitely, you know, can get you a better rate on somebody who might be looking at like an unedited manuscript. You know, any work one can do ahead of time is going to minimize the amount of time somebody else looking at it later has to spend, and they're not going to spend so much of their time catching obvious stuff, so they're going to have a keener eye for some of the more nuanced, some of the, you know, I wrote they instead of those kind of typos that are really easy to miss. They're going to be able to sort of catch those if some of the more obvious stuff you yourself or some of your first readers have already caught. So when it comes to publishing, that's the one of the pitfalls, I think, is the editing, underestimating the amount of time and the amount of effort that goes into editing, and having a plan ahead of time to decide how you're going to address that, how you're going to afford it if you do decide to pay somebody. And my suggestion is that most people will probably want to pay somebody. The last thing I'll say about the pitfalls of publishing is I do self-publishing. That's not great for everybody. That's not going to work for everybody. If you've got other jobs, if you have other commitments, if you're not looking to write several books and like turn this into your primary occupation, self-publishing might not be the way to go for you. There are so many things that a traditional publisher bring to the table in terms of, again, getting that editor even. But there are so many more things. The distribution stuff I talked about, having boxes of books in your home versus print on demand. You know, a traditional publisher will have a warehouse. They will do that print run. So they're going to provide, you know, some of those things for you. And you have to decide, okay, well, I'll make less money per book, and is that worth it to me? The other thing is if your book is really good, and if you landed a publisher, it probably is pretty good, you're going to sell more books. So yes, you'll make less per book, but if you get your book in hands of more people and somebody else is doing the work to make that happen, well, maybe it's worth it in the long run. To me, it's not. Again, I'm not hard up for an advance. I'm not hard up for a paycheck because I have other revenue streams that I've already discussed. But, you know, if you're in that situation where you're just, you know, you're hard charging to write that book, but you also, you know, need to not dedicate all the time that goes into all the things around writing a book, and you need, you know, the money more quickly, you may want to go with the traditional publisher. That is just going to be up to the individual and their own particular needs. All right, so I've answered the questions that I was asked. I'm going to probably do another live stream later tonight, be a little more spicy, maybe not be anything about writing or maybe just some topics adjacent to writing. But get those questions in, and I will be glad to answer them in the next one. I hope everybody has a great day. Bye.